one of the readings that we did based on Julieta Singh's book, No Archive Will Restore You. There's a section where she discusses the idea of the ghost archive. And so these are often archives, like memories that we have that are built on stories other people tell about us. And so I think in some ways, this kind of question of like, what is in the archive? How do we think about memory in the archive? And really doing what you just talked about a photo within a photo within a photo, which to me sounds a bit like salasil,
I love that. I'm using
So
that.
yeah. So it's really great. All right, so good morning, everyone. It is so lovely to see your faces. I am really delighted to be able to welcome to our class today two very special people that I've gotten to know actually quite recently. I had heard about them previously, but I only met them in person just a few weeks ago. And we have with us today Studio Salasil. So that's Sara bin Safwan and Zainab Hassoon. They are a very cool creative platform that does all sorts of things. But in this particular case, we're going to be speaking about an exhibition that they recently curated called Crystal Clear. And I'll tell you a little bit about that exhibition. But before I do that, I want to just kind of frame the conversation that we're having today in relation to our class, the Body Archive. So you can kind of maybe trace a connection between what we're going to be talking about and the kind of readings and conversations that we've been having over the course of the semester. As you know, in kind of thinking about questions of the Body Archive, like what makes a body archive different? How is the body a source of knowledge? Can we think of it as an archive? And in what way? Is the body singular, or does it have to be understood always in relation, like in relation to other bodies, in relation to the non-human, in relation to political and economic contexts that produce it? And so in thinking about those kinds of questions, part of what we can do is not just read academic texts, but also explore the ways that artists have archived, used their bodies, and unpacked questions of what does it mean to actually archive. And through the conversations with Sara and Zainab, I hope we can, on the one hand, learn a little bit more about how artists have done this in the past, but also engage with them, with Studio Salasil, in a very important kind of departure from traditional pedagogy. So it's not that we're just simply learning about what other people did, understanding it and maybe producing it or, reproducing it, but we're actually centering ourselves in that process and being in conversation with it and reacting to it in ways that serve us as individuals and also as a community. And so what I mean by that is that in some ways, our self-tracing project that we're going to be working on in the last 1/3 of the class, which requires you to kind of like be really attuned to sort of how you're feeling and really centering the kinds of ways that you want to have an expressive, take on something, can be a really wonderful opportunity to also learn from some of the approaches that Sara and Zainab have employed in their work as they put this exhibition together, but also from the artists that are featured in their exhibition. So we're not answering any questions today. We're probably asking more questions than we answer, but hopefully also making space for a kind of exchange. And I really look forward to your questions after we hear from them about their exhibition. So with that, I want to say that maybe we can just spend the kind of first minute hearing from you about your name, because I think it's so fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about Studio Salasil? Where did that come from?
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having us today. It's really an honor to be here. We feel very honored and privileged to be part of this. And as I mentioned to you before, I would have loved for you to be my feature. So it just feels so, we feel so lucky to be here, honestly. And thank you for this opportunity. And I see a lot of beautiful people in this class. So I would have loved to be part of this class as well. So I just wanted to say
Well,
that.
Zainab, you certainly are now, and you're co-teaching in a way. So I feel like
Yeah.
we're the lucky ones, you know what I mean?
Forever students. So yeah, just wanted to start off with that. And then yeah, in regards to our name, Studio Salasil, it stems from the idea of the word salasil, which in Arabic means chains, but it's where the term doesn't literally mean chains. It's the idea of consistency, continuity, that the essence of, you know, something that goes on that doesn't have an end. So the infinity, the possibilities of, you know, the ongoing and the progression of it. So yeah, it's just, and also just the name kind of flows easily, just the way that we work together and the way that we put things on together, they sort of happen in a very natural, flowy way, I would say.
Yeah, and I would say also just because we're curators, so we work a lot with artists. And I think even in that practice, just you know, having conversations and building relationships with artists is incredibly important to us. So the idea of building strength and bonding together and having that continuity, and also having discussions that kind of keep us in a generative practice. So like ideas that keep building and developing, going on and on and on. So yeah, that's kind of the idea behind the imagery of chains as well.
That's really great. I love the word salasil, which is also, plural of silsila. And you can really actually riff off that word in so many ways. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's also important to kind of mention that the exhibition that we're going to be discussing, where I met both Zainab and Sara, took place at a place called Bayt Al Mamzar, which is a location that is sort of like, I don't know how you would describe it, but let's say in an area that doesn't, is not the typical go-to place for kind of thinking about art and artistic exchanges, at least at the kind of formal level. So it's a grassroots initiative by Abdul and his brother, where they redid their grandmother's house and created a kind of cultural center where exhibitions are curated, but also conversations are held. They have an artist residency. In fact, the one that I visited when I was there was in the bathroom. So they redid the space in the bathroom to be able to accommodate somebody who works with materials where she requires producing a lot of noise because she works with really things like stone, for example, and she has to cut them. So you can imagine what that produces. And it's a really, really interesting space because the vibe is so generative. And when I came to the exhibition for the opening night, which I almost never do because I find these things a little exhausting, I plan to kind of go in, say hi to Ray, meet the curators, أسلم عليهم, take a quick thing and just leave, partially because of this kind of moment that we're living in, where sometimes celebrations feel like they are just not resonating with where I'm at emotionally. And so I felt like that was going to be my capacity. I could not go more than that. But what was really fascinating is as I walked into this space, it really felt like a different kind of space. It felt like people were there for curiosity, to see other people, but it was really reflective. It felt like the energy levels were kind of at this effervescent, calm, introspective thing, which I really have not encountered, at least not immediately, before, really, I'm almost in the last 6 months or so. And so it almost allowed me in. It invited me in a way that I wasn't expecting. And as I had conversations, including with Sara and Zainab, I came to learn that in some ways, this was the essence of what they were trying to do. And so I'd love to be able to kind of hear from them a little bit more about the conceptual aspects of the exhibition. What does it mean to think about archiving this moment that we're living in today? What does it mean to also create a space for community contemplation? Can that even happen? What does that look like? And so what I'd love to do, Sara and Zainab, is sort of pass this on to you. And I think you have share screen abilities on your machine. So if you decide you want to show us some images or walk us through the exhibition, that would be great.
Of course, thank you so much. And yeah, you know, curating the show at Bayt Al Mamzar, I really hope that everyone can take a chance to come and visit. It's such a beautiful, multifunctional space that really doesn't feel like you're in Dubai. It's in a very residential area. And it's so multifunctional. You know, there's the exhibition happening whilst at the same time artist studios in residence there coming in and out. So it's a very kind of active space for creation and just kind of bumping into people and having great discussions. And I'm so glad that you managed to stay on our opening night, May. Otherwise, yeah, I'm so glad that we met that night. All right, I will share my screen. You can see? Okay, great. Yeah, I don't know who's, you know, maybe interested in the arts or is an artist or curator or aspiring to be, but you know, we're really excited to share our first exhibition here in the UAE together as Studio Salasil. You know, it was a really tough exhibition, I would say, in terms of dealing with how we're thinking about the now and how we're thinking about the future. We had started thinking about this exhibition conceptually before the summer of 2023, actually. And the basis was always to think about the future, and it kind of derived from this feeling of us as creatives and individuals living in this region with so much going around us. We felt that there was this kind of stagnant conversation of constantly being stuck in the past. So this is our curatorial statement. And basically, we set out this intention to trying to expand the notion of the archive, as I was saying, and look at how as artists and creatives, how can we archive moments? How can we archive feelings? Is there a way that we can use our imaginations or build on myths or delusions even to reimagine the future in a way?
Yeah, I think I would like to add also, it's the idea that due to the nature of and the state of the world, and maybe even our personal state, with and in response or in reaction to what's going on in the world, we wanted to put on something that encompasses those feelings. And you know, as we're confronting the moment and the present, how do we then imagine a future that we want to live in? How do we imagine an alternative future where we exist, as well as documenting and preserving our history? And that's where archiving and the point of archiving comes in, is that a lot of the artists that we work with, they use material to archive or material to create new works, to imagine a new world, which also the work that they've created serves as archival material for us to look at in the future, and kind of thinking of, okay, we've created something for the future. How do we now figure out a way to use it as archival material, and how will that serve and how will that function for us to look back and say, this is the world we lived in and this is where we are due to kind of what happened. So it's looking at the past and then imagining a future, but then the past doesn't really serve as this nostalgic or it's not necessarily a feeling, but rather something more tangible, more archival material that we can use to be inspired and utilize and function with.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how we thought of the title of Crystal Clear, because it's as if we know exactly where we want to go and where we want to be, and we have the confidence in that of what we set out to do, basically. So these are the artists that are in our exhibition. We have 14 artists from all over the place. You might recognize some of their names, but yeah, I highly recommend that you go look at all their practices, as they're all quite amazing. Some are living and residing here, and some are living outside as well. So we wanted to take you quickly kind of through our floor plan. This floor plan is actually from our drafts and our like kind of behind the scenes progress. This is how we plan our exhibitions beforehand getting into the space. So we built, just drew out the space like very simply, like on a program. And I don't know if you can see my cursor, but this is kind of like the entrance into the house, and we'll get into the images just in a bit. But yeah, this is how we started shifting things around. We are able to move images around and just see how things work. Obviously, when we get into the space, everything sort of changes because, the way that the artworks respond in the space and how they fit together look quite differently, obviously, than on the screen. But this helps us get a really basis of idea of how we wanted to take on the house and the villa, to really experiment with the space and utilize as much space as possible. So this is the entrance, and you enter from here. There's the main room. And then over here is like a mini hallway with some artworks as well. And then this is the main gallery space. The rest of the house has a garden, and then in these empty spaces that aren't marked are artist studio spaces. So it's quite a large space, and yeah, it was really great to work with.
And
Ultimately.
I just wanted to add that normally, I think at Bayt, what they've done before is they've utilized mostly the gallery space, which is the main space where works has been exhibited. But I think our intention with the space was to interfere and take over and occupy the space with the works, and kind of create a flow where people interact with the space outside as well. So this is a veranda outside where we put out works. It's kind of tricky sometimes to put works outdoors, especially with the weather. But I think it's just the idea that people kind of cannot just be in one place, and the idea to explore the house and see the way and imagine how the house could function differently. We painted the walls, we moved the bookshelves around. Again, this hallway, usually it's empty, so we filled it up with works. There's a video work here. And just to give the visitor or people who are occupying the space this feeling that they can maybe feel the disruption that has happened within the space. It's a home, but then again gives it that different feeling when you enter.
So this is outside of the house, and you sort of enter, and this is the veranda that Zainab was talking about earlier. So we managed to put works outside. We really experimented with display. And I would say as well that, and I think Z mentioned earlier that we wanted to treat the entire exhibition as an archive itself. It was really, this responsive task that we had asked the artists, how do you imagine the future, and how do you create an archive, and how does your work serve as an archive? So because of that, the works are very responsive to the current time and place. So we're going to see a few works that are, focused on Palestine or Sudan or Iraq. I would say that the show just inherently became political without it being so confrontational. But I think once you interact and engage with the works on like an intimate level, you can really start to see how much they hold and how much power they hold. So this is the entrance space. When you walk in through the door, we managed to put in our own library and resources from our personal collections, and the studio is also building its own library as well, hopefully in the future to be accessed publicly. And these books, and we had some books open as well that lent to pages that really inspired us, and also just looking at how text and publishing also serve as archive material as well. And then we come to the first work, which is the Masruji. So this is a video piece layered on top of metal prints. Each one is lit, and they're pixelated images, which she gathered from satellite imagery. She also uses archive material, and also the satellite images are utilized as archive materials. I won't get too much into all of the works, but this is just for you guys to see the space. We have Haneen Sid Ahmed here on the side in the projector. She uses Sound Archive from Sudan Tapes Archive. Highly recommend that you check her out. Here's a fun little kitty flag that we created with Mohammed Tartour. And then this is the main exhibition space where you see our wall text, and then getting into a variety of works that look at architecture, that look at different materials. You might also notice that we really played with the exhibition design by using brick material or aluminum vitrines. We really wanted to play with that idea of implementing our own sort of narrative and exhibition design within the space. And the installation process it took a while, and Z and I, we managed to completely do the space on our own with some help. We're not an institution, so you can only imagine what sort of things that we had to pull to make everything happen. But yeah, I decided to put this text here to kind of reiterate, the power of speculating futures and thinking about alternative futures, how they're linked to memories and narratives of the past, but allowing us to kind of think about those possible futures. And I think especially within the context of our region, where everything seems to be under threat of being lost, this is a really valuable way of how artists are able to reflect about our current past or present, to allow us to make our necessary changes to reach where we want to be, inshallah, in the future.
Yeah, so I guess before we get into it, I don't know if anyone has any questions so far or wants to ask anything. What we're gonna do now is go through 3 artworks and kind of link them to the idea of archiving and archiving as a body, not necessarily the physical body, but what else exists beyond the body, and how other objects serve as a body and archival material. So if anyone has any questions or any thoughts or comments before we get into that,
You can totally interrupt us.
Yeah,
we don't mind.
yeah, please feel free to ask. So, and then we can take it to the next step.
So here we have Ali Eyal, who's an Iraqi artist, who really looks at kind of he explores his personal as well as kind of intimate relationship with Iraq, and how he had to leave at a very difficult time, which was the product of so many Iraqis during the Gulf War and the invasion. And so the way that Ali Eyal has kind of looked at the way he approaches his work, he creates fantasy narratives and these characters, and he often says that he comes from a farm or a forest. He never really says that he comes from Iraq, or so he builds on this kind of like identity in order to cope with his past. And he kind of creates his own narratives and his own stories. So within this work, you kind of see it's a very large painting, almost over 3 meters wide. There's someone holding it, and then within that, the paper is folded within other characters also holding memories and tangible items, and then tucked in between their hair, or in other scenes, there's other scenes happening. So it's a painting that you can spend so much time with. And I think that what's so fun about this painting is that it acts as a paper or a photograph that you don't know that it's being torn or it's being mended. So there's kind of like this play on, what is being forgotten or what is being remembered as well.
And I would also like to add that when you look at the image entirely, you almost think that, we're looking at the future, even though, Sara was saying they could be memories, but it's almost as though they're memories of the future, and the idea of that we've already created our memories and our future. And this is also where the title of the show comes in crystal clear. So it's this idea that, we are searching and we're speculating a future using archival material and creating the archive, but it's almost that we know that the future is there, and the future is, even though we think it's not certain. With this, I can, when I look at it, I feel that we've created the future and we're looking at it, and we're sort of, saying that this is our narrative, this is our stories, and this is what we've created as material that we can use for the future. Because, in the past, we haven't had our own materials, our own resources, our own archival stories and histories. So this serves as that as well, and kind of encompasses the exhibition as a whole, I would say, and ties it all together. And then Ali's idea of refusing to acknowledge where he comes from, or, even you don't know what he looks like. He's always hiding that past, but then he's using it to embrace a future that he imagines through these works. And I think the process in between, the denial and the refusal to accept, and then the concrete, clear image that he's creating, the process in between is also a way of archiving. It's the process of archiving. And it's not the traditional or conventional way to think about archives, but I imagine it to be that the process in between. And then we also ask that question in the exhibition, is that how do you archive a process or a feeling or a thought that you've had? And I think many of the works serve as that, they serve as these concrete materials that can prove the existence of that time, even though it's quite intangible or hard to grasp or understand. When you look at it, it helps you understand the process and think about the process and wonder.
Yeah, and I think with Ali's work in particular, it's almost as if, it's a photograph that should be a memory, but you're not sure if it's a memory or if it's a dream. So he really plays between that kind of fantasy and reality. And that's what I just really enjoy. And even just looking at the picture now, there's more things that I had noticed that I didn't notice before, and I've been sitting with this painting for months now. So it's really amazing what kind of worlds he's able to build and the places that he's able to transport you to. So this is a great example of how Ali is creating his own archive in a sense as well.
And just to kind of jump in quickly, because I think there's an immediate resonance between what you're showing us now and actually one of the readings that we did based on Julieta Singh's book, No Archive Will Restore You. there's a section where she discusses the idea of the ghost archive. And so these are often archives, like memories that we have that are built on stories other people tell about us. You know, but it's unclear that we remember them based on our experiences or even from our vantage points, but they live within us. And often we have to contend with them. And they're assumed to be true, a part of our past, but what we do with them is a separate thing altogether. Whether we even question them is also, you know, kind of like a separate thing. So I think in some ways, this kind of question of like, you know, what is in the archive? How do we think about memory in the archive? And really doing what you just talked about a photo within a photo within a photo, which to me sounds a bit like salasil, you know?
I love that. I'm using
So
that.
yeah. So it's really great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's really great that you bring up this this point about, you know, being something, you know, our histories has been else
Or
has told,
manipulated.
someone else has told our stories, someone else has written about us, you know, and it's really what we inspire to do, is to create our own stories and narratives and archives and materials and works and exhibitions
Yeah.
by us, and we say this is how we are, whether, and it's the idea of even our thinking and our imagination of the show, even if sometimes what we present is a delusion of what we hope to see, or an imaginative future that might not happen. And this is the risk that we're taking by saying the future is crystal clear. And yeah, this narrative of, you know, or the idea of the concept of us creating our own stories and using those to create new stories as well.
Yeah, and I think that that is like a main you know, issue with coming from places of war, of post-conflict, of you know, of colonization, where our histories are often manipulated and controlled or erased by whatever factors. And so you know, the way that we take agency over creating our own archives and narratives is really important to, you know, also kind of create, you know, these kind of counter memories and counter narratives at the same time as well. Yeah. This is Ahmad Makia. I believe you guys have come across his work before in your class, or it might be coming up, but Ahmed is an amazing writer and publisher based here in the UAE. Has been making experimental, you know, publications and writing. So I highly recommend you take a look at his work. And this is kind of our way of introducing, you know, creative work that is not necessarily like an artist in the traditional sense. You know, we wanted to display his books, and this one in particular, Sumer, which kind of explores the ways prisoners in Abu Ghraib prison would conceal or hide their journals or books that they wanted to read in various different ways. So Ahmed actually created this book in a way that kind of mimics what a prisoner would do. So it comes in this kind of box that he's designed, and the cover is actually a laundry detergent that's quite popular in Iraq. And so what prisoners would do was they would hide their texts or books within the detergent box, and then that would kind of get them past through all the security measures. And so in it, he's published a text by a specific a prisoner that he came across in his search in the archives. And then also wrote a text as well. And I think this really brings to light on how literature and archive material can actually be used as a way of resistance, and you know, as a method of also preservation and continuing and legacy as well. So when you get the book, you actually have to tear it apart. And actually, we have a video that we can show of how he's done. So yeah, it comes like this, you tear it apart, you bring the book out. It has the pages kind of like all disassembled. And then you know, thread it together with the instructions that he's provided with the thread. So it becomes super interactive and super fun. A different way to kind of look at publishing and printed material as well. Let me get to the next slide. Here we go. For Rand Abdul Jabbar, I think this also kind of relates quite literally to your upcoming project of self-tracing. Rand takes memorabilia or like these ceramics that are quite often found in a lot of Iraqi homes, and these are a ceramic collection from her mother, and she used to play with these as a child as if they were toys. So she was kind of, you know, just imagining, you know, herself playing with them and kind of relating to back to her homeland, which she was also displaced from. And so what she's done here is taking gold foil and then quite literally traced over these different objects. And as she's tracing them over multiple times, she's kind of reflecting on these relics as if they are relics, and as a connection to her own heritage and her generational legacy. And as she's tracing them, she's also attempting to preserve that memory and to preserve the item itself. So this is also a different way of looking at archives, as she is taking a literal object which has turned into an archive and creating another archive out of that as well. So I think you know, the way that Rand as an individual, you know, kind of searching for this connection back to her home, really invites the process of remembering and transforming those. Lastly, we have Juline Hadaya, who is a Syrian artist who quite literally took on our, you know, our curatorial brief and this idea of crystallizing a moment and crystallizing the current time. And so what she's done is kind of created this crystal block, and within it is a rendering of the apartheid wall between occupied Palestine. And you can see that there are mini soldiers, and it's quite, you know, it's quite amazing how it's completely like a 3D rendering. And her idea behind it initially was to create a glass sculpture that she would then break, so that, you know, she can build on this idea of breaking, you know, bad imagery or negative energy, negative energy. You know, when you say inkasar al-shar in Arabic, so that's kind of a saying that we have, that, you know, when you accidentally drop a glass, it kind of breaks the negative energy. So that was her initial idea, and then she decided to like crystallize actually these moments and accompany it with a sound piece.
So the sound piece, it consists of a compilation of field recordings which were taken and recorded from a surveillance in Gaza in the last 3 months. And then also some samples from Ahmad Bakri's film Juline, and as well as other protest statements and songs. So this serves as a dialogue and recordings that invite the listener to think of a radical future, to think of a way to, you know, also extend the moment, you know, with archiving. The idea with archiving sound specifically, it's you take, you know, a sound that you hear that's gone in a moment and you extend it. So she's kind of extended it and put it on a loop where it's consistent to serve the idea of preserving it, and you know, the moment kind of becomes infinite where you can't really forget it. And this is the idea of, you know, preserving memory. And it also acts as, you know, when you listen to it, it adds to the collective memory of our time and our reflection of, you know, how we can imagine a different future remembering these sounds as well.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna play a little bit of the sound piece. Yeah, I think we will all be able to recognize some of the sounds that are happening. And I think this would also just invite us to think about, you know, the collection of these sounds and how they actually ignite a sort of feeling or memory when you listen to them. So just applying those different senses when doing so.
لسه يقعد بنازع بين ايديك ويستشهد بين ايديك. شو بدك احلى من هيك صورة؟ شو بدك احلى من هيك موقف؟ هذا اللي كان يهزنا. كان الصواريخ رب عز وجل الصواريخ توقع بين قلب الغرفة، توقع الصواريخ ما تنفجرش فينا. من الله مش منهم يعني.
So yeah. Yeah, you might be able to hear some familiar sounds, and she's sort of taken these field recordings also from these online archives, also these films and what we've seen online, and put them together in this sound piece. And I think that, you know, she's absolutely been able to crystallize this moment that we're experiencing right now. And yeah, I think that's that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sara and Zainab. I really, really appreciate that beautiful overview of the exhibition, and also like a super concrete close-up look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of your artists to kind of really give us a good feel for some of the ideas, but also materials and geographies that kind of surface in your exhibition. So I'm going to ask kind of like 2 quick things that I think are going to be super relevant for our class as we embark on questions of self-tracing together. And then I'd like to open it up so also if people have their own questions or even just reflections, like even if it's not a question, you would just want to share something about how you felt, you know, kind of seeing this work, then please feel free to do so. So the first thing that I just wanted to ask you about, which is something that I noticed in the exhibition itself, and I really was very intrigued. I really liked it, is sort of typically when you go to an exhibition and you're standing in front of a piece of work, you have that little text on the wall. Sometimes it has like pretty standard information, like the name of the piece and has the name of the artist. But it'll also tell you, for example, and there's like a standard for this, right? Like born in this year and is from this place. And what struck me in your exhibition is that you didn't follow the standard model. It felt like it was actually almost purposely departing from this very particular way in which people are supposed to be telling their biographies. And I wonder whether you can tell us a little bit about that, because one of the things that we are doing together in our class around self-tracing is thinking about categories. So often we're socialized to use categories because countries use them, schools use them, even simple application forms sometimes use them, and we have to box ourselves into a thing. But sometimes when we dig a little deeper and we reflect on our relationship with those categories, we find that they not only don't tell the full story, but sometimes can be constraining for us. And so I was wondering if you could share a little bit from your experience working with these artists and coming up with these wall texts. How did you deal with the question of categories?
Yeah. It was indeed very, very intentional. I think in our experience, just growing up, working in the field, just, actually just being in this world, we're constantly put into these categories that we don't want to restrict or define us. So I think when we are showcasing work as well, you might be able to tell that they are from a certain place and certain context and certain geography. But I think it also comes in line with the idea that we really want to be able to build our own narrative from our own lens, which is really, really important and kind of helping us dismantle this system. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think by also like the idea of connecting and engaging with these archives, the exhibition and our aim is to kind of foreground the contradictory ways and categories that that often divide us. So we're constantly put in these categories to be divided. You're labeled as this to be from here, so you have to kind of confine to these ways or these stereotypes or what the other thinks of you rather than what you think of yourself. And we want to really emphasize this idea of collective memory, collective archiving, and and opening up possibilities of alternative perspectives. And I think when you want to think about and you want to open to an alternative perspective or possibility, kind of defining where you come from or who you are takes that away in a way, takes it away from the possibility of just imagining something completely different to your own existence.
And I think that also, like, for our own demographic and our own audience members as people living and working in Dubai and having a variety of nationalities, come to the exhibition and experience it. I think it's also, for them to build up these conversations, and have something that relates to them and not being it's not being told to them, but rather them finding out for themselves. And I think that is just like this process of engagement that we really want to have with everyone.
Yeah, that's so great. Thank you so much for that, because I think, and this leads me really to kind of to the second question that I would love to get your reflections on. But it feels to me almost also like your stance, on kind of like categories in terms of the artist is reflected a little bit also in the variation that you have in the artist's works around memory and the archive. So I'll give you an example. It wasn't the last, it was the second to last piece that you showed by Abdul Jabbar, where she quite, as you pointed out, is quite literally tracing origins, is kind of an attempt to preserve. So really the impulse there is there's something there, and by doing this is an attempt to preserve. Yet we have this totally opposite impulse in a way, from somebody like Eyal to say there is no origin, or the origin is obfuscated by so many things. And I don't even necessarily want to go there. I may do this other thing, which is tentatively linked to it, but really it's very future oriented, And so between these two, I don't want to say extremes, but let's say anchors, lay a whole bunch of these other things. Like, so it's questionable, like, how do we think about Juline Hadaya's work? You know what I mean? Is it really about this? Is it about that? Is it a literal archive of sounds, or is she coming up with something completely new? And so really what I love about this work is the ability to really play with this question of, like, the archive, is it a documentation of things that are actually there or just imagined or are being constructed in the moment through the performance? Like, for example, Ahmad Makia's work, where in order to engage with it, you have to use your own body and do something. And so I'd love to kind of maybe hear more from you about, if you were to take a moment, not to synthesize the whole exhibition or to take a singular stance, but, how does this question of memories in the archive dovetail really nicely with what you're doing with categories of the artist? Is there a connection between the two? Or is there a conversation there? I'd love to hear more about this from you.
I think, you know, memory is super interesting because it's unreliable in nature. And so with these archives, it's an attempt to sort of create that reliability. And I think that, you know, with Ali, for example, he's completely, as you said, just kind of like going against that by, you know, creating this memory that you think you might have had or you might not have had. You know, this can also be reflected in maybe perhaps, you know, archives or narratives in history that may have been, you know, purposefully or intentionally erased or controlled. You know, what are these under narratives that might be happening over, you know, let's say, for example, official narratives or state narratives? You know, this is like, I feel like also brings up that wider conversation around that as well. So I think definitely, you know, between, you know, categorizing and these memories and categorizing these archives, it's intentional to kind of leave us in this state of not knowing exactly, you know, where this might lie, but also kind of like, you know, creating that opinion for ourselves rather than it being told. And, you know, categorization is something that is consistently created by other figures, let's say in, you know, in systems of colonization where it is completely reductionist, you know, and it's confining and it's and to break away from these ideologies takes a very long time. And so I think these artists are kind of utilizing this moment through their works to completely you know, disregard that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you summed it up quite well.
That's
But
really great. This is really great, guys. Really, thank you. And honestly, I just wanted to say, I'm going to open it up now to people to kind of ask or share whatever they would like. But there's so much resonance on so many levels, honestly, between some of this work that you've shown us today, even some of the most basic texts that we've been exposed to or read. Like, we have a quote actually from Antonio Gramsci, who's an Italian philosopher who was in prison, talking about this question of what does it mean to have an inventory, like a sort of inventory of memories within one's body that you've never taken, but those traces themselves are documented history, documents of the political or economic situation that you've lived in. So it really feels both on a sort of conceptual, but also very literal level that you're, you know, resonating with that. So thank you so, so much. And so if anybody has a question, just you can kind of unmute yourself and answer. If we have a lot of people, then just put your hand up and we can take turns, okay?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, you know, we've been conceptualizing and really thinking about this exhibition from before the summer last year. And, you know, we came back to the UAE around September and we started working on it. And then, you know, we were confronted by what was happening in Gaza in October. And we kind of sort of just paused everything. We were not working. We did not do absolutely anything at that time. We were so focused and concerned, I would say, about what was going on that we took it on and it became our, you know, personal life. And I see that it does serve as that. We cannot look away and we do serve as witnesses to these times. And I think that's also part of our journey and the exhibition's journey, I would say. And then when that happened, it created a shift for us. We had some artists that were incapable of working. We were incapable of working at that time. We froze, you know, we froze in time. And I think that also serves as maybe it sounds a bit, you know, it doesn't make sense, but in a way it does serve as us documenting and archiving our moments and our experience through the exhibition, which is, you know, there was so much uncertainty, and me and Sara were having this conversation of how are we even thinking about the future when we have so much to
When it's
confront
so uncertain
and we have
as
so
well.
much to, like, how are we saying that the future is crystal clear when we're here looking at this and we're witnessing something, we're so uncertain of what is yet to happen. But there's that feeling that, you know, we are so close to where we want to get to. And if we don't do this, we are actually pushing back. And we had so many conversations, Sara and I, about this. Do we continue the exhibition?
Do we cancel?
Do we cancel it? Do we do it? You know, is our work even important? Like,
Yeah.
we were having these kind of questions and doubts, I would say. And we said, okay, if we are doubting this, then we aren't gonna be able to, you know, allow for, because we have the opportunity to create a space, and I think that's what we do. You know, we have create a space, not necessarily physical, but using a physical space to interfere and disrupt it, and kind of say, you know what, we are witnesses, we are experiencing this, we don't feel very good about what's happening, but we're still going to continue with our work, because that's a resistance in itself. That's a way to say we are going to preserve our time, we are going to tell our stories, we are going to narrate the way we want to live the world, and we're not going to back down, you know. And we had this many conversations again with our friends, with the artists. Some artists we had to kind of not work with because they weren't able to create anything at the time. So we were also quite understanding of that, because we were feeling that. But I think also at one point, Sara and I were thinking, you know, we felt quite behind in life, where we're behind on where we need to be. You know, we spoke to Ghaith from Bayt, and he said, you guys are, you know, you have like a month left. Where is the work? What are you doing? And even one of the biggest challenges I think we had was, you know, we were in our work, in our developing process, and it was very hard to kind of show that in the moment, because we knew what we were doing, we knew how we wanted to conceptualize it and, you know, curate it, but it was very hard to show in our process. And I think even the day before, Ghaith's mom, to be quite honest, came to us and said, you're opening tomorrow? And we're like, yeah, we're so excited, we're so happy. And she said, oh, it doesn't seem like you're ready. And I was like, oh, you know, we're ready. But all the works are here, the works are up, you know, we're just doing, we have what, 12 hours left? That's a lot of time. So these challenges, I think, as independent curators and artists, and I guess just independent, doing our studio independently, just kind of, and I wouldn't say proving ourselves, but it is to prove that we are capable of doing this, and that trust, that sort of blind trust that you will accomplish and do what you need to do to kind of put on what you're imagining. And we see curation as an art form, you know, so it is again this idea of imagining and using Bayt Al Mamzar. We're lucky enough to be able to use that space and take it on different forms. But yeah, the next day, I mean, she said to me, she said, you know, I hope a miracle happens tonight. And the miracle was me and Sara staying there till 6 a.m. and, you know, painting the wall and, you know, perfecting every little detail before we opened.
All I can say, it was emotionally, physically, mentally, financially, everything exhausting, but totally worth it in the end. Yeah. Of course, you know, this is completely, you know, our task as curators to think about the flow of the exhibition, the story that we want to tell. You know, I think logistically, we just started with works that, okay, we know that this work is done and like this would fit perfectly in the space. For example, Dima Suruji's work, the main one in the first room with the projection wall. You know, we wanted them to utilize that space. For example, Ali, we wanted to make sure that as soon as you walk into the gallery space, it's the first thing that you see, you know. All of these things were very intentional and thought about. We wanted Juline's work, you know, luckily some of the artists were actually available like during install, and Juline was here. You know, we were deciding whether to put it inside, outside. She wanted to put it outside at the end of the veranda so you could have a moment, you know, outside in the garden while listening to the sound. Everything of the placement was extremely intentional in that sense.
And with, for example, Rami's work, we one of the works is it's a painting of someone on a ladder, and you can see their back, and then and there's people and the, you know, at the bottom looking, everyone's looking up, and we put it up, so you're looking up at something, at someone looking up. So it's this idea of imagining the possibilities and the future collectively, and as a reflection of you and someone else and the time. So everything is really intentional. And, you know, we spent a lot of time deciding before, you know, the floor map that we showed you in the presentation, that didn't look like the way it does now when we first started, before we got the work. So we're playing around a lot. Let's put this here, let's add this here.
Yeah.
But then once we got a hold of the works and they started coming in, which is also another story of how we managed to get a lot of these works, we, you know, when you're in the space and, you know, where you're interfering and you're interacting with the space, it allows you to really imagine also the flow of that. So just physically being able to be in the space served as a way to help us curate as well.
And I think that in our studio and like working as curators, and we've been working as curators for quite a while, we wanted to have that notion of experimentation with display, with ways of looking, with ways of seeing everything, and experimenting with different materials. And obviously it's a house, so we have to kind of like rethink it in different ways. So
and then
yeah.
I just wanted to add in terms of display. So one of the works, you'll see it's on the floor. It's Muhammad al-Faraj. We received them just as prints, and we added the breaks, and we kind of curated it in a way where there are different levels. So, you know, you look down on it. So there's like the idea of looking up, looking down, looking around. So kind of giving you that, the feeling of looking at like a 360, you know, and that's how you should also look at the future, from different angles, from different perspectives, from different narratives and ways, and also creating that to create more possibilities, more narratives, and sharing that collective memory together in a way. Great question, actually, and it really ties into how we took on this exhibition. So a lot of the works are either newly made works for specific to the exhibition, or some works are two different works that have been adapted to create one work, or multiple works that have kind of been altered to suit the conversation that we're having, but also the state of the world. So it's a variation of all, I would say. And this was intentional, you know, this was intentional to exhibit work that has been created and then commission new work.
Yeah. And I think also just as part of a curator's practice, whether you're working independently or maybe within a gallery or a museum, you do come across these different tasks. So commissioning new works or collecting, you know, works that have already been created. For example, I think maybe this is a good picture for, so Rand had already created these works. We had spoken to her. She's also really good friends of ours. We love working with our friends. And you know, these works were already created, and they fit into our theme when we had spoken to her about it. So we kind of created our conceptual framework first, and then kind of go on to kind of scout for these works. And then we also leave it kind of very flexible and open. We're not so strict to kind of the initial idea of our curatorial statement. We allow it to adapt and grow and develop with the conversations that we have with the artists, with the works that we're receiving. You know, maybe we didn't see something in a different light, for example. And then the work next to it is actually a work that Sara Booker previously created, actually during her third year of university as an architectural student, and then she adapted it for us, kind of adapted it for us while we're having conversations with her, you know, to create kind of like a new narrative and a new way of redeveloping her idea. Rami, for example, was already created work. Muhammad al-Faraj, which is the work on the floor, that was newly created work from our conversations with him. This was also a work that Muhammad had made, but then we actually produced it for him and it was only displayed online in a rendering. But then we produced it for him and actually printed it out as a flag that has been hung. So yeah, we kind of, and these, for example, what Z was saying earlier is two different works that have been now placed together to create a new work. We had a residency with one of the artists from Tunis who created these cat paintings. These are all newly created works, for example.
And yeah, we managed to commission those works and invite the artist to come to Bayt, stay a few days before the opening and work on the work. So kind of also, I think the main thing that we do here is kind of what is the word that I want to use? It's improvise with what we have. So, you know, we have an artist that we want to bring to the UAE. It's their first time ever coming to the UAE from Tunisia. And, you know, instead of shipping the works, we said, why don't you come bring your works with you? We'll do a residency together. And again, it's all part of a conversation. You know, we have an idea, we talk about it, we discuss it with the artist likes the idea, we kind of pitch it to Ghaith from Bayt Al Mamzar, and it just sort of flows together. And I think it's just that openness to be, in a way, you know, honest and vulnerable about what you want. And when you have these conversations, you just realize that everything is possible. You just sort of have to put it out there. And I think that's a lot of what we do in our practice is just, we have an idea, we want to make it happen, and then we don't wait for something we initiate it ourselves. And I
Yeah.
think that's how we got here, is just, we want to do something. If we can't find a way to do it, we'll figure it out on our own.
Yeah,
And
and we realize as well that even in our world as creatives and as artists, there's still a lot of systems that we have to break, rules that we have to break, words that we have to change. You know, every word is very intentional. I think we can have a conversation about curation and the dynamics of it for quite a long time. But yeah, it's such a big world to get into. But yeah.
yeah, and just about curation, I think we want to really emphasize the idea between a curator and an artist, and not really
And
necessarily
honor those
honor
roles.
that, and not really say that there's a gap, and just work together and closely with one another. And that's why when we invited Ghad to come to the UAE and just do works before the show, to be ready for the show, they ended up staying for 2 weeks longer and created more work just for us. And we ended up, you know, kind of representing them, but it's just all happened in organically in 2 weeks time. Nothing was planned. It's just kind of
Yeah.
going with the flow, just allowing, I guess, nature to take its course. And yeah, it's just also part of that, just that flow of, you know, conversations and movements. And
Yeah. And like you know, you said you're interested in social sciences. Like I first took a curation course as my bachelor's, and for my master's I took a post-colonial studies course. So like these disciplines can like totally intertwine, and like I've just found a way of, you know, intertwining that. And I think, you know, just like I feel like with the work that we do, you know, we inherently just like always want to be able to, you know, put in what we learned and yeah, respond to the world in a very honest way. I think that there's, you know, that's really the purpose of what we do and what we create.
Yeah, it's really important to share resources, and we don't have a formula to work off of. So we kind of create our own formula, and and again, like with the books and our library, we just want to share as many resources and readings, just to kind of initiate more conversations, and also to draw back on us growing up and not really having much to work with, and constantly searching for inspiration or references. And it's in my experience, when I was a university student, when I wanted to reference where I came from, there was so little material, and it was always, again, from the perspective of someone else, not a voice that I related to or a narrative that I understood. So again, this is why we love to share our resources and our ideas and bring on different people and artists.
That's great. So actually, I'm going to start to kind of like bring this to a close, just because I'm cognizant people have other things that they need to do, and also our speakers probably do as well. This is kind of getting into this busy season, but I really I cannot thank you enough for this wonderful deep dive into not just the conceptual aspect of your work, this particular exhibition, the question that anchors so much of what you've done so far about, how do we archive the moment, and how do we imagine a future of sorts together, and really kind of down to the nitty-gritty parts of that process, like questions of categories, and not just national categories, but also of disciplines. Like, in this exhibition, you had architecture, sound, painting, publishing, like things that, maybe for some people feel like they don't necessarily go together unless you point them out in this way. And you chose not to do that. You kind of really allowed things to come together in a way, and for that space to be a space that can hold all of that in the way that it was. So that conceptual part, I think, is super interesting. But I think this latter part of our conversation really showed me that even though the body was not necessarily an explicit subject of each work, you speak about what you do in a very embodied way. So this kind of reflection on questions of productivity, especially during a time where we're all bearing witness to what is happening around us in ways that can be so debilitating, so isolating, so atomizing, but refusing actually to succumb, and insisting on community, and insisting on creating spaces where people can actually engage with what is happening around them. I think that that's really amazing. So I'm going to take basically this conversation today to be an invitation to flow. Like, this is what I'm hearing from you, that even during very difficult circumstances or constrained resources or whatever, there is that potential for flow. And if you can kind of stay with it, it can potentially open things up. And so thank you for sharing that energy with us. Really so beautiful and so powerful. And I can't wait, hopefully, to also share back with you, what comes out of this class, of these projects. I'm really looking forward to it.
Super excited. Thank you so much for having us. And it was so lovely to meet you all. If you ever want to reach out, we'd be more than happy.
Thank you so much, and we love the questions. And if you ever want to come by, we're at Bayt. We can hang out. We can
chill. Please do. Field
trip day. Yes. Please.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon. Bye bye.